Hello again. In today's video, I will demonstrate how to input data into NewGene. This will allow users to be able to take whatever data they desire to use and place it into NewGene for the purposes of merging it with other data sets. So to begin, you'll want to have several things. First of all, you'll want to already have NewGene open. You can see that it's open right now, and this is how it looked after NewGene was installed and downloaded and installed. The other thing you'll want to have is a data set that you want to input. So in this case here, the data set we're going to use is a small version of the leader data set developed by Horowitz and Stam. And so just to show, I've opened up the data set, and you can see here that it has several variables. The C code, country code variable that's standard to the CAL data set, also has this indicator of the actual country's name, a standard year indicator, and then a variable called lead ID. This is the identification for specific leaders, a coding that is unique to the Horowitz and Stam data set. And then finally, we just have one variable here. Again, this is for the purposes of demonstration, but this is a variable that indicates whether or not that leader had a background as being an educator, okay, of some sort, either a professor, a high school teacher. The other thing to notice about this data set is that you'll see that row 2 specifies the type of data that the variable is. So for example, C code, since it's an actual numeric code, I have int here for an integer. Whereas USA and lead ID, because they have these other characters in them, they're not strictly an integer. Instead, they're string variables. This is important because this will allow NewGene to properly format the data. So now that we have this variable specified, or we have our sheet specified, I'm going to go ahead and close this. Now another thing to notice is that this data set, and indeed any data set that you choose to input into NewGene, should be a CSV file, okay, a comma separated values file. All right, so now let's go ahead and begin the process of inputting this data. So to begin, again, this is how NewGene looks when it first opens. What you'll want to do is go to the tab that says Manage Input. And when you click on it, there's a lot of interesting features that NewGene offers. Probably one of the most exciting features is that it allows you to create your own what we call DMU, or decision-making unit. So typically what we thought of as decision-making units in the original NewGene were countries. Well, in this case here, for the purposes of this example, the decision-making unit we're thinking of are leaders. So how do we do this? How would we create that as a DMU that will then allow us to incorporate this data? Well, how we'll do it is we'll click on this tab here called Create DMU. So we click on that, and then you see that it tells you, it gives you the options of how to actually specify the DMU. Now in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to insert the category, and we're going to make this all caps. So we're going to call this leader. And then we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to make this, call this leader. And then we just simply click OK. Now at this point, I'll ask you if you would like to import the members of the DMU leader. What this is asking if you have a specific data set or data file, such as a CSV file, that contains a list of all your potential leaders. Okay, just like if you were doing this with country, if you had a list of all your potential countries. We don't have such a list right now, and it's not absolutely important that you use such a list. So we're going to click No. Now at this point, you'll notice that leader has been added as one of the decision-making units. This then takes us to the next step. So right now we're under the Manage DMUs tab. We're going to move over to the Manage Units of Analysis tab. Now currently you can see that there's several different units of analysis, and some of these should be very familiar to scholars who conduct international relations research, such as the country data set. You actually see that this is specified as having a daily granularity, meaning that it can be specified by the day. We also have country, and this would be your common dyad year data set. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new unit of analysis, and this new unit of analysis is going to be for leaders. So we're going to click on the new unit of analysis. And at this point, we have to fill in several pieces of information. First of all, it's going to ask you to enter a brief identifying code for the unit of analysis. And it's going to want you to put this in all caps. We're going to go ahead and put that in again as liter. And then description, we're going to do liter again, just like we did before. Now, it's going to give us several options for the time range granularity. You see that much like the previous versions of this software called Eugene, we have year. But we also have year month, day. We have several different time granularities that are available. For the purposes of this example, we're going to pick just year. So this is going to be, we're going to be, in other words, creating a liter year data set. And in fact, given that we're creating a liter year data set, it may actually make sense to come up here and amend our title of liter. So we're going to go ahead and call this liter year, and we're going to go ahead and call this liter year. That way it's clear that this is a liter year unit of analysis that we're creating. And again, we'll make sure that this stays on year. We're going to come back here. We're going to come down to here, and you can see that since we're using liters, we're going to want to specify that as the decision-making unit. So we click on liter, we move that over to here, and then we click OK. And you can say that now liter year has been successfully created. So we click OK. At this point, we're ready to go to the Manage Variable Groups tab. This will be where we actually incorporate the liter year data. So we come to here. Now you can see this has a variety of different data sets, mid data sets, sync scores, also from Cal, very common data used in the previous versions of this software, country data. We're going to want to add a new variable group. This is going to be our liter data. So what we're going to do is a couple things. First of all, let's verify again that indeed it's called liter data 2. That is the name of the data set we're going to be adding in. So we're going to click on Add New Variable Group. Now we want to enter a brief identifying code. Again, we're going to put in all caps, liter, and then we're going to put liter. We could put description liter data. That might be useful because this is going to then enable you to identify in Eugene where this data is located. And then we want to choose a unit of analysis. Well, we've already created it. It's liter year. So our liter data is going to be using liter year unit of analysis. Then we're going to click OK. At this point, it's going to say variable liter successfully created. Would you like to import data for the new variable group liter now? And the answer is yes, we would. So let's go ahead and click yes. Now here we have several things we have to fill in. Okay. Now what are these things? Well, first of all, we have to actually tell it what data file to use. So we're going to click on this. It's going to open up a browsing folder. We're going to want to click on the desktop. And in my purpose, and the reason why is because on the desktop is where I actually put the folder datasets to preload. And that's where I place the liter data 2 dataset. And again, remember, this is in a comma-separated CSV file format. I click on this, and it's now here. The next thing I have to do is fill in the liter, the actual identifier, and the actual year identifier. Now, to do that, let's go back again to this data set. You see that the liter identifier is actually called lead ID, whereas the year identifier is titled year. Given that, we can go back to Eugene. We'll type in lead ID. And then for the year, well, it asks you for two things. It says for the year start and year end. But if you notice, the year end is optional. And it really doesn't have any meaning for this particular data set. But it could obviously have meaning for other data sets. Again, this is part of our attempt to be able to give Eugene a lot of flexibility in terms of how the users want to use it. But for our purposes, all we have to do is type in year. Now, the final thing we can do, or that we need to do before we click OK, is recall again that we have that line, that row 2, that specified the column, the data types. And as that data file includes a row with column of data types. Default is N. And again, if we go back to this data set, remember, row 2 specified the data types. So what that means is, yes, we do have one of those rows. You do not need to tell NewGene which row it is. It'll be able to identify it. Click on this button, and then we will click OK. And you can see that now NewGene is importing it, and it's telling you a progress on this. So 42%, 45%. It'll continue to incorporate this. So we'll wait just a few moments for it to upload this data into NewGene. Alright, so now you see that it's finished. It says variable group leader data leader successfully refreshed from file. So we can click OK. So what does this mean? Well, now we've done this, what we can do is go back to the original screen of NewGene, which was the create output dataset screen. When we do that, if we look down here, I'll minimize this, or I'll go down to here, and you can see there's leader data. And if we click on that, here are the variables: lead ID, teacher, year, C code, etc. So the variables from the Leader 2 dataset have now been incorporated into NewGene. And this will now make it easier for you to be able to merge this data with any of the existing data that is in NewGene, such as sync scores, mid data, etc.